Redbreast 12 single pot Irish whiskey. Some say it's the quintessential Irish whiskey. Let's find out. Welcome to another episode of Erik Wait Whiskey Studies, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing the Redbreast 12 single pot Irish whiskey, and I will be doing two other Redbreasts, the cask strength as well as the Lustau. Really looking forward to getting into these. Really have been enjoying it. I've already got past the shoulder, actually just down here to the label, and I've watched a lot of other whiskey tuber reviews comparing my notes with their notes, and there are certain themes that come up a lot, which is that this is an impressive Irish whiskey with a high quality price ratio, but it also sort of characterizes what might be considered, say, classic Irish whiskey, what is sort of the standard barrier for Irish whiskey by which all others are going to be compared. Now, there are different styles of Irish whiskey, different classifications of Irish whiskey. It's not that they necessarily should be smelling and taste like this. You know, an Irish single malt is going to be different than this whiskey. But in terms of at its heart and at its core, what it represents, this is Ireland in a bottle. All right, before I give you my review of this whiskey, here are the notes on the history of a Redbreast and this bottle. Redbreast single pot still Irish whiskey is produced by Irish distillers at Middleton Distillery. It is the largest selling single pot still Irish whiskey in the world. Redbreast single pot Irish whiskey was originally produced by W&A Gilbey, a Dublin spirits merchant using distillate sourced from Jameson's Bow Street Distillery. In 1857, W&A Gilbey was founded in London. In 1861, W.A. Gilbey opened a branch on what is now O'Connell Street in Dublin. At the time, it was customary for distilleries to sell distillate to wine merchants, or bonders, who had ample supplies of casks through the importation of fortified wines and would mature the whiskey themselves under bond. In the 1870s, Gilbey had become a wine importer and distiller and had more than 300,000 gallons of whiskey from Dublin distilleries in stock under bond and sold whiskey to consumers under its own labels. These whiskeys were aged at least 6 years in Gilbey's own sherry casks at its bonded warehouses on Dublin's Harcourt Street. In 1903, a whiskey known as John Jameson & Sons Castle J.J. Liqueur Whiskey 12-year-old was marketed in a bottle of similar shape and markings to those used for subsequent bottlings of Redbreast. This whiskey was produced using distillate sourced from the Bow Street Distillery in Dublin, the home of Jameson whiskey. This whiskey was likely the forerunner of Redbreast. In 1912, Gilbey's makes a mention of Redbreast in the sale of a Redbreast J.J. Liqueur whiskey 12-year-old. Redbreast was a nickname given to one of the whiskeys by Gilbey's chairman at the time, who was an avid birdwatcher in reference to the robin redbreast. In 1968, Irish distillers opted to phase out the supply of bonded whiskey to merchants such as Gilbey's. This threatened the future of the whiskey brand, as Irish distillers controlled all the whiskey's distilleries in operation in Ireland at that point. However, following pleas from Gilbey's, Irish distillers agreed to continue to supply distillate for the production of Redbreast. In 1971, Irish distillers closed all its Dublin distilleries, including Bow Street, and consolidated production at the new Middleton Distillery, a purpose-built facility in County Cork. As a result, production of Redbreast whiskey moved from Dublin to Cork. In 1985, Gilbey ceased production of Redbreast. And then in 1986, Gilbey's entered into an agreement to sell Redbreast brand to Irish Distiller, the producer of Jameson Irish whiskey. And in 1991, the brand was subsequently relaunched after its several years of absence from the market. Initially launched as a standalone 12-year-old, Redbreast has since been released in 15-year-old, 20-year-old, and other variants. The Redbreast 12 single pot Irish whiskey is aged for a minimum of 12 years. It is a blend of 50% malted barley, 50% unmalted barley, aged in ex-bourbon casks and Oloroso sherry butts. It's bottled at 40% alcohol by volume and sells for anywhere between $55 and $65. So on the nose, it's sort of difficult to describe. And I've been comparing my nose with some other fellow whiskey tubers. And there's a certain common trait that we've all come up with, which is there's sort of a buttery character to it. However, this is not butter you pull out of the refrigerator. This is not melted butter that you put on your popcorn. Rather, it's a buttery character that I would say if you're going to take some apples and you're going to sort of saute them in butter to make some sort of dessert dish, you take some apples, you put some cinnamon on them, and then you have sort of a cooking butter, melted butter on it. That's what I'm getting. But it's not so melted that you could pour it over your popcorn. I don't know if I'm making any sense or not, but it's sort of this thick, buttery sauce with apples and cinnamon in it. Loads of vanilla. Lighter caramels. I would say the apples, I'm getting both red apples and green apples, so a little bit of the sweeter red apples and a little bit of the more tart red apples, say a Granny Smith. Loads of spice, particularly on the back end, a lot of that cinnamon, nutmeg, baking spices. The sherry notes are very, very, very faint. They're not. This is not a sherry bomb by any stretch of the imagination, but they do make their presence known on the back end of the nose. All right, on the palate. Wow. One more. I think this makes a quintessential Irish whiskey. One is the texture, that silkiness. Two, the fruit characteristics of that apple. Three, the creaminess, but also that it has a development from the front to the middle and to the finish, such that 50% malted barley makes its presence known. In the transitions, you get the apples, the cinnamon, lighter caramels, and that creamy butter character. But I would say it's leaning more into the pastry side, maybe like a butter croissant or some sort of butter pastry, even maybe a hot buttered roll. You start off with the apples up front, transition into like that butter sauce, but the apples are hanging in there with a little bit of cinnamon. Then on the back end, I pick up just a hint of that maltiness, and then the caramels and the vanilla really makes its presence known. So I really like the development of it, that it has these real nice transitions. But I would say this, I'm more impressed with it now than when I did an original neck pour. It has opened up really, really, really nice. So I like the development, I like the complexity of it. It is just slightly sweet on the palate. And as I'm talking now, the sherry notes show up more on the back. I find on the back end. So we're talking a little bit of raisin character on the back end. A really, really nice whiskey. And I think for the price range that it goes for, I know prices can vary a lot. Let's say $65, somewhere on there. I think this is a high quality price ratio whiskey. That there are whiskeys that don't have this quality, even coming out of Middleton Distillery, that sell for so much more. What am I going to give it in terms of a score? I'm going to go solid 92 points. 92 points. This is an absolutely fantastic whiskey, and it's going to be beat, I got to say, by its bigger brother, the Cask Strength. You're going to want to stay tuned for the Cask Strength review, because that whiskey is absolutely spectacular. And I almost kind of wish I did this review before I even touched that, because once I had that whiskey, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, once I had that whiskey, I was like, oh, wow, now it's kind of a big challenge. Can you really recommend the 12? When maybe people should just jump in and go straight for the Cask Strength. But that would depend on the availability, price, and so forth in your region. But we're going to get into that. I'll get into the next video. So you're going to want to tune in for that one. So if you're a subscriber, I want to thank you very much. If you are not yet a subscriber, you like watching my videos, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when I go live or post a new video. And if you are one of my Patreons, join my little group. I want to thank you very much. And if you've had the Redbreast, what do you think? Is this one of your favorites, or is there another Irish whiskey that you think maybe is more of the flag bearer of Irish whiskey? All right, until next time, Cheers.